Welcome back, everybody, to Pull Hook Golf, the podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cook, and today we're diving into the world of short game mastery because if you've been listening to this podcast, you know my short game sucks. So we've got a special guest today in PGA Tour winner and now short game guru, Parker McLaughlin. I mean, your journey through professional golf is nothing short of inspiring, from winning on the PGA Tour to becoming known now as the short game chef. We're going to get into all of that and how you've dedicated your career to helping golfers of all levels and helping them sharpen their short game skills, which I think is the most difficult aspect to golf in general. But once again, we'll get to that in a little bit. But folks, in this episode, we're going to explore Parker's background. We're going to talk about how his path to the PGA Tour helped him transition into this short game chef and really the success of his online platform. And then we'll dive into some practical chipping advice for all of you. So without further ado, welcome, Parker. Let's get started here. And let's get started with your beginning. Can you tell us, I mean, from the early days of, growing up in Hawaii and so forth, how'd you ultimately get from a little kid in Hawaii to making it onto the PGA Tour?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I think, I was always a gym rat. So my dad was a basketball coach and a volleyball coach. My mom was a volleyball, so I was always in the gym. And so, I mean, I grew up with a basketball and a volleyball in my hands, and those were sort of my first two loves. And then along came golf, and I was sort of 10, 11, I got introduced to it. And I was like, I started to get frustrated. Some of my teammates in basketball and volleyball, they would show up late and we would have to run lines because of them. And I just remember thinking to myself, golf is a little bit more of an individual sport. And so however hard I work, I usually see payoff in the end on my end as far as success goes. So that's sort of what initially attracted me to golf. And then, I didn't have great access to golf courses growing up. We weren't a member of any country club or anything like that. I grew up playing at the local Muni golf course. It's called Alawai Golf Course, and it's actually the most. It had like a Guinness Book of World Records for the most rounds of golf on a golf course in 1 year. Some 255,000 rounds in a year played. It was the busiest golf course on planet Earth, right? Because you got basically, it's in Waikiki. You got sunshine every day, and so they play sixums and 6 minute interval tee times. I'm not kidding you. It's crazy. You get to the third hole and it's like a 4-group backup. You jump the fence. You go across to Jack in the Box and you get some food and you come back. Anyway, that's how I kind of grew up. But I did a lot of. I was more into playing. So I would always go out in the afternoon. Parents would drop me off and I would play in the afternoons. So I'd go and play 9 holes and I would just hit a bunch of shots. And I loved the feeling of being creative, being behind coconut trees and having to shape it up and over or around it, left or right. So, and then, missing greens and just, hitting a bunch of shots around the greens. For me, that was the really cool part about golf was the creativity. That was what really drew me to the game. And then, I was decent in high school. I was good enough to sort of get a half scholarship to UCLA and went over there and played for, I redshirted my first year, played for 4 more years. And then it was sort of I was never great in college, but I had a couple of second place finishes, but I was always kind of, 15th to 35th, I'd say. And I think for me, I ended up having wrist surgery after college, and I took some time. I probably had about 9 months where I couldn't touch a golf club. And so I took some time to really work on my mental game. And I met a sports psychologist. I started reading a bunch of books. We started implementing some of the things I was learning in the books. And then I turned pro after sort of about a year's time. And that was, to me, that was the then separator of going from a mediocre college golfer to then I won on every major mini tour in the next 2 years, from the Hooters Tour, the Gateway Tour, the All Pro Tour, the Spanos Tour. Like, I won on every single major mini tour the next couple years, after really I didn't win at all in college. And so a lot of it was just that mental part of it that I just sort of unlocked, that proper sort of mental state for me, and how to, the right things to feed my mind, but then also the right things like how to get me into a flow state. And then I just sort of just gently ascended up to the PGA Tour. So a couple years on the mini tour, 1 year on the Corn Ferry Tour, and then got my tour card. So that was, there's not a lot of us that come from Hawaii that have made it to the PGA Tour. I think there's been 4 of us that have won on the PGA Tour that have been born and raised in Hawaii. So it's a small group.
Can you name them? I know Colin Morikawa. You. I don't know the other 2 though, off the top of my head.
No, Colin is actually from LA. So it's Dean
his
Wilson.
Family. That's right. The media loves to play it up around how he is a Hawaiian kid and so forth. But you're right. He's LA. His parents were from Hawaii. Yep. He spent some time there. But so hang on. So let's go back to the list.
Yeah. So Dean Wilson, David Ishii, and Ted Makalena.
Okay.
And myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good trivia question right there.
Yes.
I love that. Now, you mentioned something that we talk about on this podcast a lot, which is around the mental side of the game and how you got a mental coach in order to help you really kind of hone in your mental side of the game of golf. And I don't think this is paid enough attention to per se, but you're going back to where, that wasn't a popular thing to do. What kind of pushed you to go down that path?
Man, that's a good question. I think that, for me, it's, I was always great at short game. You've got Montreux as your background there behind you. And on that Sunday, when I won my only tour event, I hit 5 greens in regulation on that Sunday. And I hit 1 green in regulation on the first 9 holes. And I was 8 for 8 in up and downs. So I've always been really solid with my short game. And so, when I didn't start this out of like, hey, I'm going to just sort of start a business. It was like a caddy friend of mine said, look, he's caddied for me a bunch of times. And he's like, your short game is ridiculous. You should do some tips on Instagram about how people can get better with their short game. Like I've never heard anyone describe it the way you describe it. And so I was like, all right. So he filmed a dozen videos for me, little 1-minute videos. And he helped me sort of set up an Instagram account because I'd never been on Instagram before. And he's like, okay, now you got to come up with like a catchy name. And I was like, can't just use my own name. He's like, no, come up with like a catchy name. And so I came up with Short Game Chef because, every shot around the green requires some type of different ingredient or some type of different recipe. If you want to go high and soft, or if you want to go low and spinny, there's all sorts of different shots, and each shot calls for a different type of a recipe. So for me, I was like, well, short game guru, nah, it's a little too self-serving. Short game wizard, nah. So I was like, I sort of settled on Nick. I knew it was going to be about the short game. I wasn't going to be talking about the long game. I was going to be talking about the short game. So then I said short game and then chef. And then I started, as time has gone on, you start to see, even on the PGA Tour feed now, it's like someone will hit a short game shot and they'll be like, that was so saucy. Or they'll just have like the chef's kiss emoji, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, like I don't know if it was sort of me that sort of started that, or if it just the short game and saucy chef, all that recipe, all that stuff kind of goes together. But yeah, anyway, that's how it all sort of got started. And literally 2 days after I had put my Instagram account up, Kevin Streelman reached out to me and said, hey, I see you're doing some short game teaching. I'd love to spend a couple hours with you. And so my first paid lesson was to the guy ranked 93rd in the world. And I was like, I better figure this out. And then it's literally just been word of mouth ever since.
That's incredible. Let's go back though, because most people can't even dream, or they do dream of winning on the PGA Tour. And I got to ask you, because this was a unique win on the PGA Tour, because you mentioned it before as to how many greens you hit, but I believe you only hit one green in your first 10 holes in that final round and ended up still winning by 7 shots. I mean, that's it. Once again, another great trivia question. Who is the only player to hit one green in their final 10 holes, or their first 10 holes of the final round, and still win by 7 shots? It's like, tell us about that experience.
Oh man, it was, like the first 3 days, I just felt like my golf swing was just right in the slot. I couldn't miss. My putting was on point, and, I shoot 68, 62, 66, and I've built up a 6-shot lead over second, a 9-shot lead over third, and an 11-shot lead over fourth. So like I was blitzing the field. And then all of a sudden, like the last like hole and a half on Saturday, I started feeling like a little bit tighter through impact. The ball started coming off the club face a little bit more low heel, which is sort of like handle raise and hold on to it for me.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just like, I knew it just didn't quite feel right. And I was like, I think I might've lost it. So I didn't sleep much that night, because I was just like, in my own head, like, oh, I've got a 6-shot lead. These are the days of Tiger Woods where you're like, Tiger's the only guy that wins by this much. And so I've got this huge lead, and, all the negative thoughts that could possibly go through your head. And all the mental work that I'd done, it was like trying so hard to just keep out the bad thoughts and harness the good thoughts, like Happy Gilmore, right? It's like, keep out the bad, harness the good. And it was hard. It was just hard to do. And it was a tough night. I didn't sleep. Hardly at all. Late tee time the next day, get out to the golf course, and I was just like, okay, just got to get to the range, and then it'll all be fine. And I get to the range, and I didn't hit one shot in the center of the club face in my warm up session, and it was just like, oh man, this might be a rough one. I better buckle up and like really like be ready to grind. And so I did. I grinded one green in regulation. The first 9 holes, I was even par. Missed the green in regulation on 10, made bogey. And yeah, I mean, I never really felt comfortable at all in that entire round until I hit my second shot on 18 onto the green.
It
was a brutal day.
I've talked about this with PGA Tour caddies, that sometimes for them, even when their player has a big lead, that they're most fearful at that point, because it's like the thoughts start creeping in, and all of a sudden it's really hard to sleep on a big lead on Saturday night. So everything that you just said resonates with the audience, resonates with me specifically, because I'm like, wow, that fits perfectly in line with everything else I've heard from everybody that's kind of been in that position. But clearly you've got an insane short game, because you missed 9 greens in your first 10 holes and still ended up winning by 7. So now we got to get into the fact of you transitioning into the short game chef and getting into that side of the business. You've already talked a little bit about this as we've been talking about how you kind of had a buddy set up an Instagram account for you. You got to create a cool name. So the recipes, I totally get that with each of the different short game shots and so forth. But in that transition, I mean, you knew that you had a good short game, but what made you think, oh, you know what? I can actually teach this, and what's being taught isn't necessarily the right stuff right now?
Yeah, so I think where I saw a gap in like playing a bunch of pro-ams, seeing amateurs struggle, I saw a gap as to like, well, what is it that they're trying to do, and then what is being taught? Like, what are they telling me that they're being told what to do? A lot of them were telling me like, oh, I'm trying to get the ball in the back of my stance. I'm trying to get the shaft forward. I really want to get good ball contact. And they would inevitably either get really good ball contact and it would go over the green, or they would fear that really good ball contact and then they would back out of it and then they would chunk it. And then once the second that they went into that chunk mode, then they went back here and then they would flip at it and then all of a sudden it would become a blade. So their really good shots were actually like 10 to 15, 20 feet too far. And then their bad shots, they were still chipping again short of the green or over the green. They're chipping back. So I just started looking at this stuff and I'm like, boy, the information that they're being given is not necessarily right. It's not what tour players are doing. I think that there's a way that I can explain this to people in a simple and digestible way that can really help them to make their chip shots a little bit easier and not so precise and not so difficult.
Man, that is music to my ears, because I'll tell you, I mean, I'm one of those guys that you just described, to where it's like, okay, I'm either gonna have it a little bit heavy and leave it short, or I'm blasting it over the green. So I definitely think I could use your help by all means. But that being said, what do you think? This is the short game side of it is kind of a competitive area where there's certain guys that have this niche of being a short game guru, so to speak. But how do you differentiate yourself? Is it from a PGA Tour standpoint that, hey, I played, I won, or is it something different that you feel like is your unique approach?
Yeah, I think there's a handful of things that I do really well. One is my pedigree, right? So I obviously having played on every sort of mini tour, Corn Ferry Tour, PGA Tour, having won on the PGA Tour, that gives me the understanding of what it feels like to play and sort of choke at the highest level, and then what works the best under those high stressful situations. So that's one sort of part of it. I think the other part of it is, I was mentored for about 7 years by Paul Azinger, who, in my opinion, is got one of the best short games when he was playing. He still does, and Paul's, from what I can tell, and the people that I've talked to, Paul's got a top 3 golf IQ of all time, and he's in that upper echelon of people that just, he thinks about things differently. And so I was able to learn quite a bit from him. And in learning that, I take some of that and I'm able to pass that along to my clients I communicate to them in a very easily digestible way. And I think that part of it is it's hard to quantify, because, when you go through my website and you go through the app that we've created, the videos are made in like 1.5 to 3.5 minute videos, so that you're able to digest that information, take it in, and then you can then move on to the next video, or just like take down your notes or go practice it right then. So I think one of the greatest compliments that I feel like I continue to get is that I make it so simple. I make it so easy and so simple and so easily digestible for people. And I think that in a teacher, being a good communicator is extremely valuable.
It is huge.
Because I could go and say, a bunch of big words, right? And tell you like, well, you're da 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 da, and use all these huge words that where all of a sudden you may think I'm smart, but you haven't necessarily learned anything. Because
you got no idea what the hell you're
speaking
saying.
so far over your head.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
100%.
So the point is like, yeah, I want to make it so that you can understand what I'm saying, that we can talk about a handful of different things, and that hopefully one of those things fits and sticks, and that you're able to take that in and be like, that's your light bulb moment. That's a feel or a thought or a cue that you can latch onto, and that'll help carry you through when you're hitting your short game shots.
I love that. Now we're going to get into just some average golfer chipping advice here. All right. So we're going to test you a little bit and give the audience some tips that hopefully are going to help them. But chipping obviously can be one of the most intimidating aspects of the short game for any golfer. But what's the first piece of advice you'd give to any average golfer who struggles with consistency around the greens?
Well, I would say that you would want to look at a chip shot more like a bigger putting stroke than you would want to take it from your normal 7-iron and shrink it down. I don't necessarily love being like, let me get in a wide stance with my feet, let me push my hands forward, and let me just make a smaller iron swing and hit this chip shot. Because then your body doesn't move, your feet are too wide, hands are pressed forward. A lot of things are leading to this ball coming off hot. I think that a chip shot should be closer in relation to a putting stroke than it would be a full swing with like a 7-iron. So I would always start with, if you don't know where to start chipping and you want to just be like, let's build a baseline foundation, bring your feet all the way together, get them just touching. And just start there. Start moving your body, start moving your torso, start moving your rib cage, start moving your arms in unison with all that. Don't start using the wrist just yet, but just learn to turn, learn to pivot. That would be the very first place to start. And I would start with a lower lofted club, like a 52 or a pitching wedge. Start there if you and start, 2-3 yards off the green. And start to build in a baseline. That would be my biggest suggestion for someone who's like maybe just starting out or maybe just unsure of what philosophy to sort of go with.
I love that, because it is so tough to put everybody into a box and to have general advice for people. And that right there was probably, I'm sitting here going, wow, that's a really good freaking answer. Because I've heard a lot of different answers to that question. I'm like, wow, that's actually really, really good. So clearly, folks, Parker knows his stuff. I don't think that is up for debate. Now, I will get a little bit on the personal side, to where my member guest over the past weekend, I struggled. I had the yips. I was chunking. I was thinning. There really wasn't any good ones in between. And granted, I'm a 3.5 handicap right now. When I played on the mini tours, like, you said that you were going all around. And by the way, folks, when you're on the mini tours and playing around, you're playing on a lot of different types of grass, and it is not always the most well-kept golf courses out there. So I get why you understand so much about the different grass types too. But that being said, what would be a drill or a technique that you would use to eliminate something like that with the chunking, the thinning, or even what I would call with me, the yips with that right hand?
I would say that there's a lot of different things that could possibly go wrong. So one of my favorite drills when you've got the yips is taking your trail hand. Okay. So if you're a right-handed golfer, take your right hand, put your left hand right here, and you pivot back together, and you just hit some shots that are 10 yards. All you're trying to do is just feel the pivot. That's it. So it will be really difficult for this right hand to get in there and go this way. You want to just feel like it's moving all together in unison. And that would be a great drill for you to do. If you feel like the right hand sometimes gets a little too active, just have it on there, and then just feel like you pivot back, pivot through, and allow that right hand and right arm to just kind of be a passenger to the pivot.
I love it. Now, I've heard you in other interviews, and you've talked about the fact that, and you mentioned it even on our interview without me even asking really about it, about how, instructors will, a lot of times when it comes to chipping, all your weight on the front foot, forward press, get that shaft lean going and everything. You're a guy that doesn't really believe in that. Now, do you like the hand slightly forward, or is it something to where you want it to be kind of in line with the club face?
So here's what I would say is that there's a time and place for all that stuff, right? I think inside of 30 yards off of a tight fairway lie, I'm not necessarily looking for compression of the golf ball. I want softness. So I don't need my hands forward because I don't really want to compress this golf ball. So, and again, the more that you lean those hands forward, if you don't do anything, let's say with the club face, and you just leave it square, that leading edge is going to present itself a lot more, and you're taking away the bounce of the back edge of the club. So it's making that shot a little bit more difficult or tough to pull off. So, there's a time and place for all of it. I think like one of my guys, Keith Mitchell, that I've worked with for probably 3 years now.
Cashmere Keith.
Yeah, great dude. And his short game's really improved. He's come from when we started, he was like 200 something in strokes gained around the green. He's I think, 70th maybe last year or the year before, and then maybe 100th this year. So, but anyway, so he's one of those guys where he said, look, you didn't teach me a technique. You didn't teach me a philosophy, a theory, or whatever. You just basically explained to me, hey, if your hands are forward, you've basically taken a 60 degree and turned it into a 55 or a 50 degree. If you stack weight on your front foot, okay, you may get ball first contact, but that angle of attack is going more down. That ball is going to come out faster. So you just have to understand, is this the right situation for that? Right? Is the pin in the back so that I can lean forward, so I can put my hands forward, and this ball can come out low and get to that back pin. So it's in my, at the end of the day, I think that one of the things that I like to explain to people is how these sort of inside of 30 yards, how these ball speed accumulators, how they work. So if you stack more weight forward at setup, that ball is going to come out faster. Now you may get better contact, but the ball is also going to come out faster. How are you going to compensate for that? Are you going to open the club face? Are you going to lean the shaft back? Or do you want to lean the shaft forward, leave the club face there, and hit a more drivey shot to a back pin? So it just really depends on, it's like using that club, whether it's like the club face, you twist it open or square, whether it's the shaft, you lean it forward or back, or whether you take the shaft and you go up or down with it. There's a lot of ways that you can manipulate how much ball speed you're going to get just through setup. And then we haven't even talked about what you want to do on the backswing. There's a variety of ways to be able to do it on the backswing, to be able to either create ball speed or not create ball speed. Just depends on what type of shot you're trying to play.
Whew. That is describing things in a way that I understand now what you mean by short game chef. Those are all recipes to success there, and it's all different ways of going about it, which is awesome. I love hearing that because I feel like too many instructors, earmuffs if you're a golf instructor out there and you love to teach in a box, but there's too many instructors out there that just teach one way, and it's this way or the highway. I've had to fire coaches before, and one of them being an instructor out here in Arizona who is a pretty good instructor. It's just he's got a box system and wants you to swing like Ben Hogan, and it's like, I can't do it. I don't have the flexibility of a Ben Hogan. There's all these aspects that go into it, and it's awesome to hear somebody like yourself talk about how there's so many different ways to do it. You just need the right recipe in the right situation in order to make that happen. So that's really cool to hear. I'm going to selfishly ask you one other question about Bermuda grass, okay? So Bermuda grass, we got that a lot out here in Arizona. Now, I'm a New York kid. I grew up in upstate New York. I've lived in the city for years, and before moving back out here to Arizona, I played college golf out here at GCU, go Lopes. But that being said, I never really figured out how to play in Bermuda. Whenever overseed comes in and it's wintertime, I'm great. I'm fine around the greens. I wouldn't say that I'm phenomenal, but I'm good, right?
Yeah.
Now,
yep.
Or I would say an average scratch golfer. When the Bermuda comes, I am the worst short game. I become quickly a 6 to 8 handicap in no time around the greens. So I'm just curious, do you have any kind of insights around just Bermuda grass, kind of that fluffy, or even when it's wet soil down there?
Yeah. So, I grew up in Hawaii. So all Bermuda grass until just recently, where they started planting some paspalum, which is a little bit easier to play off of. But the Bermuda grass, I will almost always typically go down in loft. So if I'm usually chipping with my 60, I will just immediately I'll go down in loft by 1, and I'll grab my 56. That would be where I would start. Somehow the 56, it's got that little bit squarer face. It works through the turf a little bit better. So I would start there. There's a couple ways to do it. You can, depending on the lie, right? It always starts with the lie. Like, that is number one. You got to always pay attention to the lie. If the lie is sitting up, it should be no problem. You can be steep, you can be shallow, you can hit draw path, cut path, kind of whatever you want. Or if it's down grain, you can do the same thing. Now, if it's into the grain,
this is where I'm struggling. This is the juice here.
Yeah, if it's into the grain and it's sitting down, it's going to be a more difficult shot. I mean, I would say on average, let's say if you spin a 20-yard shot at 5,000 RPM, I would say on average, if you've got it into the grain Bermuda lie, it's going to go down to probably like 3,000 RPMs. So you got to understand it's not going to usually come out like this. It's going to come out more knuckleball, lollipop kind of a shot.
Okay.
So play for that. Don't be disappointed in that. There's just too much grass that gets caught in between, right? If the ball's sitting down and it's into the grain, there's too much grass that gets caught in between, and it's too difficult. So a couple ways you can do it. You can go, obviously 56, go down in loft, even 52. The lower the loft, the better.
Okay.
Granted that you don't have a short-sided shot to go with. But then I would play around with going handle higher at address. So you're engaging a little bit more of the toe. So you're going to get closer to the ball. Handle's going to go higher. And then you can mess around with feeling a cut path from there or feeling a draw path from there. Different players have different feels, and it's not always the same thing. But I've seen success doing it both ways with that technique.
Would you want the handle forward or a little bit further back?
I would go just barely slightly forward. So
okay.
up and slightly forward.
Gotcha.
Because I think especially it just depends on how far down it's sitting. You may need a little bit more, a little bit more of this. So that handle going slightly forward would help get you a little bit more this way to get down and go get that ball.
Gotcha. What kind of leads to that flub to where like it's just all like you feel like you kind of swung it into there, but it's just turf and the ball goes about 2 inches in front of you. And let me tell you, this happened to me at the member guest, and I was absolutely embarrassed. I was just like, put me in a cave and don't let me come out of there for at least 7 days. I don't want to see anybody. It's just
the other way to play that shot too, it depends on how firm or soft the soil is. But the other way to play that shot is to almost play it like a bunker shot. If it's sitting far enough down, you can play it like a bunker shot and just play for the poof. You know what I mean? Just play for that.
I feel like I have, like when I have been successful in Bermuda, that's what I've done. I've basically played it like a bunker shot and just kind of tried to blast it out of there, or even kind of just have one of those shots to where you kind of just stick it into the ground to where there's no kind of follow through. You just kind of jam it and you have some speed going in there. But again, I hadn't been playing in a while, and it's one of those things to where when all of a sudden you've had 2-3 week stints to where you haven't picked up a golf club, and then you got to go play a member gas, and all of a sudden you get into that situation. It's like I started that's why I was like, it's 100% the yips, because I am terrified right now.
Well, the stab, if you haven't been practicing and you get super steep with it and stabby, oof, that's a brutal one. It's just hard to time up. It's hard to time up.
It is. It certainly is. And trust me, I know firsthand after last weekend exactly how that goes. Now, let's move into one of the unfiltered parts to this podcast, because this is Unfiltered Golf Podcast. So if you have a swear word or two you want to drop in there, feel free to go ahead and do so. That's always welcome. But with social media, and granted, like you've gotten onto social media where a friend helped you out and like was like, hey, you need to create a name and everything. So you weren't necessarily a social media expert coming into this entire thing. And there's a lot of instructor rivalries that go on. And it's been interesting because I've kind of seen you from the outside in around kind of how you've interacted and so forth on social media. And I know at one point there were, especially when Joseph Mayo, for instance, with Victor Hovland, was talking about getting steep and everything. And people were trying to drag you into this battle with him and you didn't really do it. I mean, how'd you kind of stay out of this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard. I think, I've got great respect for all the coaches. It's, we're all at some level, we're all just guessing, and we're just trying to do our best to guess and help our players with, like your flaws. They may be similar to somebody else's flaws, but if I tell you to do one thing, you may react in a totally different way than player B. And so it's always about trying to, hey, try this and then let's get some feedback on it. Try this. Let's see how your body responds. Let's see how you react to being in this position or that position. And you never really know. So it's like, you're sort of professionally guessing a lot, but the more that you do it and the more that you see, the better you get. So, it's like, there's some really smart people in the golf instruction industry. I think that, the social media stuff, I always wanted to create a platform where people I wanted to help people get better. That was number one. I wanted to make the short game sexy and fun. That was kind of number two, like sexy, fun, entertaining. And that was what the goal was. And then as sort of the steep movement came along, I think, in my opinion, I think that, typical tour players are between 5 and 8 degrees of angle of attack down. I think for a very extreme shot, they'll go 12 to 15 degrees down, but I think it's more like 5 or 10 times per year that they would hit a shot like that, and that would not be necessarily their stock shot. So when someone comes along and says, hey, this is the shot you should be playing all the time around the greens, I'm like, I don't necessarily agree with that, because I don't think you need maximum spin or maximum low trajectory. There's going to be times when I want some height, when I want some mid trajectory, some softness, some land angle that's a little steeper, because greens are firm and greens are fast. So, I think that our philosophies were definitely different. Mine comes from more of like hey, I've been out there and I've played and I've seen and I've talked to all these guys, the Steve Strickers and the Matt Kuchars, the Cam Smiths. Like, I've talked to all these guys about their philosophy and what they like to see with the golf ball, and how they like to see it landing and what they like to see spin wise. These guys are not going for maximum spin and maximum low trajectory on every shot.
Yeah.
Those are just the shots that make it on TV because it looks cool to the eye. Yeah,
the low spinny, all of a sudden it hits twice and then checks up. I know what you're talking about.
Super cool shot, but it's also it's a shot that players use, on a rare occasion, because it's not the most predictable shot. So guys that are playing it for their living, they want predictability.
Yeah, consistency.
They want consistency. They want predictability, and that's where I think some of our philosophies differed a bit. And Joe and I have we've known each other for a long time, and so we've had conversations about this. And I'm like, I think you just need to tell the whole story. Like, this shot, the low one that you're talking about, yes, it's a good skill to have, but I would never, ever, ever want an amateur golfer to try to be 12 to 15 degrees down on every shot. I just don't think that it's a recipe for success. I've seen too many amateurs that come to me on the steep side and that are just deathly afraid of the ground and ground interaction. So I like seeing guys that are more sweeping and brushing of the ground, because I think it makes golf a little bit easier. It makes chipping a little bit easier. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm all about. And so I just, I think that as Joe and I have had these conversations, that I don't know if he necessarily sees my side fully, but because he looks at it directly as the numbers. And I'm looking at it as like, okay, well, if we're just looking at the numbers and you're trying to produce a perfectly low trajectory with perfect maximum amount of spin, that would be like staying in a poker hand and having like a 5, 6, an 8, and a 9, and just hanging on to the river and waiting for that 7, because that would be the perfect hand. Okay, it would be the perfect hand, but what are the percentages of that actually happening? I don't think they're quite as high as if you're like, you know what, I'm going to live and fight another day. I'm going to make sure that, this is a little bit shallower. If I happen to make a mistake here, my worst putt is still 4 to 6 feet from the hole. Where if you're 12 to 15 down and you make a mistake an inch behind the golf ball, you're chipping it again. That's a bad mistake. You can't make that mistake.
Funny you say that, because earlier today, we're recording this on Thursday. This will come out later. This is Thursday, August 29th, to where the Tour Championship is going on, right? Victor Hovland was out there earlier today, and sure enough, one of the other analysts was trying to get Immelman to get in on Mayo, because apparently he does not agree with Mayo whatsoever in regards to his philosophy. And even with Victor, he's like, yeah, it might have worked for Victor for a while, but there's a bell curve to this. And that's why you're seeing now to where like his short game isn't always great anymore, to where he kind of peaked with it, and now he's starting to see some of the inconsistencies that come with it. I felt like that was pretty interesting to hear as well. Just to back you up on that.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen that. Send me that clip when you get a minute. but I do think it's always about a balance, right? Like that's an important shot to have, to understand how to hit that shot. Because again, there will be a need for that shot at some point. So it's important to have that. But there's also a big need for a mid-trajectory shot from like 10 to 30 yards that you can trust that lands on the green and stops within 4 paces. If I'm 12 to 15 degrees down from about, let's say, 20 to 30 yards, this ball is coming in hot and low, and it's stopping from when it lands on the green. It's stopping 7, 8, 9, 10 yards from when it originally landed. And if that pin is on 4 paces off the front edge, you're going to want something that has a little bit of land angle steepness plus some spin. So you want to be able to blend those together. So, it's like, I just think that there are so many shots that you can have in a short game repertoire. In my personal belief, I would rather start with like, hey, let's get our baseline. Mm-hmm. Let's get our baseline standard pitch shot down. And then we can hit the crazy angle of attack down. We can hit the crazy shallow one. I mean, I've measured guys that have hit up on it on a high spinner from like 20 yards. They have hit up a degree to 4 degrees, right? They're actually hitting up on the golf ball, sitting on a tight fairway lie. Yeah. So like, and the ball goes up like this, and it lands on the green, and it almost spins back. It's got that much spin on it because the land angle is so steep that it bounces once and then spins back. So that ball essentially has more stopping power, but you're hitting up on it, which means that you're hitting the ground and then you're hitting the golf ball on the way up. So there's a good argument to be able to have all those shots. My constant like chat with Joe is tell the full story. The shot that you're telling is 1/10 of short game, maybe even 1/20th of short game. You've got shots out of the rough, you've got bunker, you got plug lies, you got downhill lies, you got uphill lies, you got bump and runs, you got pitch shots, you got higher pitch shots, you got flat. I mean, that's just 10 shots I named right there off the top of my head. Not to mention you got a cut spinner, maybe a low draw one to a back pin. There's so many shots, and he's hammering this one so hard that my discussion with him has always been about tell the full story of short game. Don't just hammer this one thing, because it's a little bit misleading to the public to just hammer that one thing.
I'm in agreement, and I also just figured out that I'm steep. because everything that I hit that low spinny one. And whenever the pin is like middle back, like I hit that little, all of a sudden two hops and checks. And granted, and now I'm realizing too, I'm like, wow, yeah, we're talking about how inconsistent this particular shot is. So when I'm practicing all the time, or I'm getting out there a lot, that shot can work. However, I stop and I've got these big gaps in between when I practice or play. And I'm like, oh shit. I mean, it makes me just be like, how dumb could you be, man? Like, just figure it out. Like, you got to get a little bit more shallow on here. So again, it's awesome to hear you talk about it, because I'm realizing stuff in my game. So I know the audience has to be picking up things for their own game as well, which is what I love, having these conversations, especially with instructors like yourself, to where I'm like, wow, this is so insightful. And yeah. Anyways,
yeah, because I mean, it's like, yeah, it's like we go, it's like my philosophy out of the bunker is not to be wide and shallow. Like, I like a lot of steepness in the bunker. I think that's how you are supposed to play a bunker shot. Same thing out of the rough. My guess would be that you're way better out of the rough and out of the bunker than you are on a standard 20-yard pitch shot. That would be my guess.
100%.
Because you get steeper, and steepness is needed there. If you're steep on a tight fairway lie, you don't really need that steepness, because the ball is just sitting right there. It's not like you got to go down and go get it. You only really want to go way steep if you're really trying to create a ton of spin, like maximum spin.
Yeah.
But I also would say you can stop the ball even faster if you blend a land angle that's steeper with a lot of spin. So if you blend those two together, now all of a sudden you've got a golf ball that's stopping within 2.5 paces of where it's landing.
God, that's be nice.
That's true stopping power, right?
Yeah, that is.
So so, but this whole thing has just gotten, it's just like, he's dug his feet in the ground, and I'm like pushing back, because I'm like, look, I think that, like, it's the fair thing for the people out there is to understand that short game consists of a lot of different shots, a lot of different techniques go into hitting these shots. You're not going to play a bump and run the same way that you play a bunker shot. You're not going to play a flop shot the same way that you play a standard pitch shot. So, like, there's a variety of techniques, and it's a disservice to the people that are out there watching to say that this is the only way that you can do it. I just think I think it's a disservice. I just don't think it doesn't help the public get any better. The public needs to know, like, these need to be compartmentalized. They're very, very different shots.
That is the one pet peeve that I have around instruction. And that's why it's tough when I asked you early on about general advice. Like, what would you give to the average golfer? Because essentially, and you answered that really, really well, and it leads into your entire philosophy about everything around the short game and how many different recipes you need. But it's my biggest pet peeve is that people are just like, no, this is the one way that you have to do this. And it's like,
right.
No, there's different body types. People move differently. Like, there's all these different aspects that go into it that it's just like, hang on a second. You're crazy if you think it's one size fits all for everybody out there. But you also have to, from my perspective too, I also sit there and I'm like, all right, from a media standpoint, or like trying to get attention or attract an audience and so forth, you can't, like, some people will do it just for that. And interesting enough, like, I don't know Joe, but I would say that part of it probably is to get his name out there more and more and more around his one philosophy. And the more that people fight back at him, the better it is for him, because it's going to lead to more attention. So, I mean, his name got dropped on a broadcast today because of that, right? So it's like, all right, this is interesting to see the different aspects to it.
I mean, even, Payne came out with a study last week that said that they measured 150 different players, mostly good players and tour players, and they measured over 5,000 shots, and they measured it on a map. And 86% of those shots There was 15, 30, and 60-yard shots. On 86% of those shots, the leading edge of the club entered the ground before there was ball contact.
Isn't that crazy?
So it's like, in my mind, I'm like, well, if you're coming in this way, right, and that leading edge enters the ground before the golf ball, well, you're in a world of trouble potentially.
100.
I think if you're coming in more shallow this way, number one, the bounce is going to help keep you up on top of the ground, right? The bounce is going to keep you up on top of the ground. If you enter in a little early, bounce will keep you on top of the ground, which keeps you hitting those lower grooves, which keeps that ball flight down. And so in my estimation, if 86% of the time that leading edge is entering the ground first, I think it's important to learn how to use the ground properly so that it works in your favor and that the ground does not become something that you fear.
Yeah, because it's something I fear right now.
100%.
Let's get into your online program. I want to give you some time here to talk about the Short Game Chef online program and I've sat there in preparation for this interview, and I went through stuff, and I'm like, wow, this is really robust. Like, you have all these different scenarios and all these different things that could happen in the short game, and you've got these little digestible videos that you talked about as a part of this for your online program. And I know there's been a ton of instructors out there that have launched online programs, right? And a lot of them don't work. What was different about yours is not only are they digestible, but they're little recipes. I mean, once again, it goes back to your name. It's too easy to relate the two because they're little recipes for each and every aspect. And like with short game, a lot of times you need that more than, let's say, oh, you need to be in this exact position here and do this. It's a little bit more philosophy driven. And like, yeah, there's aspects, like you said, to where it's like, okay, your hands need to be a little bit lower than they normally are. This is how you're slightly forward or slightly back. So talk to us a little bit about how you decided that this was the right way to go about, helping the masses, because not everybody can come out to Arizona and get a personalized lesson with you.
Totally. Yeah. And that was sort of the thing. Like, my thought process was like, I want to be able to push this and help the entire world just have a better understanding of chipping and pitching and play out of the rough and bunkers and flop shots and bump and runs and, hitting little bellied wedges and putting with your hybrid, like all that stuff, putting. I wanted just to be able to put it all out there. And so I organized it in a way where there's a bunch of different collections. So the collection, let's say a collection would be Cure the Yips. So we've got a collection on there, Cure the Yips, just 26 videos in there, walking you through step by step as to how to cure the yips, what faults, what fixes, how things go together, certain matchups. And it just goes step by step all the way through, and you get through it. We've had probably over like 40 or 50 people just in the online program. I haven't even touched in person, but they've just gone through the online portion of it. And these people have been like, oh my gosh, like my yips are gone. Like, you've saved my golf game. I actually ran into a guy in Augusta, Georgia this year. I was working with Tom Kim, and I go to dinner, and I walk to the bathroom, and this guy kind of looks at me, and then I walk back, and he walks up to me, and he's like, can I give you the biggest bear hug? And I was like, yeah. And this guy's like a little shorter, big, stocky dude, strong guy. And he gives me this bear hug, and he's like, you saved my life. You saved my golf life. And I was like, okay, you got to tell me, like, what? He says, look, I'm a surgeon. I operate with my hands all day long. And I pride myself on having the smoothest hands for my surgeries. And he said, every time I went out to play, my hands would let me down, and I would yip it every single time. But your program got me back to understanding like how to use my hands, how to use my body, what the club is supposed to be doing. And so it was really, really neat to see his reaction to it. Never met this guy before in my life until that moment. And something like that is pretty cool. But anyway, so we broke it down into a bunch of collections. And so it's like bump and run, pitch shot, flop shot, bunker play, putting, getting ready for tournaments. I've got interviews with legends on there. Like I don't know if you explored any of those, but those are really cool. The stuff with Lee Trevino, Ben Crenshaw. I've got Keith Mitchell, Matt Kuchar, Aaron Oberholzer on there. Some really, really cool stuff as far as like what these players are feeling for certain shots around the greens that they're doing. So it's a great way to, if you like the philosophies that I am sort of saying here right now, it's a great way to dive deeper into, and I really do break it down into like step by step. Like this is what I want you to understand. This is what I want you to work on. This is what I want you to feel. And you can go through the whole program. We got 280 plus videos on there. It's a website first, but we just launched the app last week.
Oh, congrats. That's big.
Yeah. And the app is, you sign up on the website first, and then once you do that, anybody can download the app, but you have to then sign in using the website. You
don't want to have to pay Apple their 30%.
I think it's closer to 40.
Oh, jeez.
But anyway, yeah, it's great. The app is super clean. We actually had a cool feature where we just went live. I was at the BMW Championship last week working with Sam Burns and Christian Bezadenhout, and so I went live for about 12 minutes there on the golf course on a Monday morning, and it was really cool. Like did a thing just talking about the 17th hole and how it would be a pivotal hole for the golf tournament. It turned out to be a pivotal hole, but unfortunately Keegan was putting. I thought he might be like, a little bit long and having to chip back, but
what a hell of a freaking 5-iron, by the way. I mean, talking about that shot, because I'm sitting there watching it. I'm like, gosh, he's got to hit this thing a mile in the air in order to keep it on the green. And sure enough, he just hit that beautiful high 5-iron. Jeez.
Well, and I think that's what we were kind of talking about. Like that's what I was talking about in my live thing, which was when guys are going to be back there in the fairway, it was going to be, if they're between clubs, they're going to choose the shorter club because that bunker was no problem at all. And so I think he chose the 5-iron rather than the 4-iron because he was like, I'm going to send the 5-iron. I'm going to hit it as hard as I can. And it landed like just barely over that bunker. And it was an unbelievable shot, but he was not going to bring long into play because long was not great.
I love that. That insight right there is awesome. Now, where can people go to sign up for the website, to sign up for the app and so forth? Give them the name and everything right now, and I'll make sure that this is all in the details for this episode as well. Yeah, so shortgamechef.com is where you want to go. And yeah, we're starting to develop the community out a bit more as well. So we're going to have places on there where you can post your pitch shots, your bunker shots, your putting, whatever it might be. And I'll be able to write back and comment and say, hey, work on this or do this drill or try this. And we're really wanting to grow a great community on this new platform. So yeah, shortgamechef.com is the place to check it out. And once you sign up there, you get access to the app and you can take me everywhere. Love that. Now, rapid fire Q&A here. You ready for this? I'm going to put you on the hot seat. Who's your favorite player that you've worked with? Oh, you can only choose one. That is a hard one. And that was my evil laugh too. Jeez, that creeped out. That was a hard one. I would say that the people that have had the most impact for me have been Keith Mitchell and Anna Nordquist. Okay, I'll allow it just because one on each tour. Yeah, that's one on each tour. I'll take that. It was neat to be able to, when Anna and I started, it was neat to be able to, she was like 95th in the world rankings, and she was not in a great place in her golf game and her mind and her short game. And a year and a half later, after we started working together, short game really came around and she ended up winning the British Open. And at the end of that year, she was 15th or 16th in the world. Wow. So to me, like that was pretty neat. And then Keith Mitchell, he's just been
he's been a great client, a great friend, and he's talked my praises up to people like Colin Morikawa, people like Sam Burns, who then reached out to me, on Keith's sort of recommendation.
That is awesome. Now,
yeah.
Who's the best, or should I say, who has the best short game that you've worked with?
Oh, well, I mean, if they've got a great short game, they're not usually coming to see me for help. Boy, that is a really good question. Oh man, there was a mini tour player that I worked with named Xander Winston that he hit some pretty nasty ones, and we worked pretty hard at it together, and he would hit some pretty nasty short game shots, but you wouldn't really necessarily know about him. But yeah, he's got some pretty good hands. But I tell you, Sam Burns is starting to climb the ranks. He's starting to get really good around the greens, but he's the thing that's tricky is that when you're a great ball striker and someone that creates a ton of ball speed, short game is a little bit more difficult because we want to remove that ball speed. We want to slow the golf ball down while still maintaining a good amount of spin. So there's a dichotomy and a push and pull there of like, well, I want to smash it, but then also like I want to slow it down. So, there's that push and pull. So, my job is usually to help them understand, okay, inside of 50 yards, these are the tenets that we got to focus on. Outside of 50 yards, you go back to smashing it.
I've never put that in that perspective before. Because everybody, like anybody that's ever played golf with me, are like, you're a ball striker, but your short game sucks. And it's like, yeah, I know this. Thank you.
That's a typical pattern.
Yeah, that is music to my ears, Parker. You have no idea. And then we've talked about it on this podcast. This is going to be my last question for you in the rapid Q&A. But since you do work with Sam Burns, and you're getting him up to where he needs to be, so to speak, with the short game, we've kind of sat there and been like, man, there's something just a little bit. This guy's got all the talent in the world. Why doesn't he win way more? And we just haven't really put our finger on it. So I wonder, have you been able to put your finger on it?
I haven't. I think the world of him. He's a great dude. Number one, he's a great human. He's an incredible golfer. I think that it's like you look at it from like I haven't really watched any of his rounds in person. Tournament rounds. We walked practice rounds together, but I haven't walked any tournament rounds with him. It'd be interesting to sort of observe because he's one of those players where he may have 9 birdies and an eagle, but then he may also have 3 bogeys and 2 doubles.
Exactly.
And so it's I don't know. I don't know if Sam knows. I'm not exactly sure, but the thing that I love about what he does is that you look at his scorecards, and so many times after he makes a bogey, he makes a birdie.
Yeah, the bounce back stat, it's a good one.
I mean, he is insane with that. But yeah, I think that it's been a good relationship so far, and I think I'm trying to see how I can be a helpful member of his team with just, I know that he's feeling more confident with his short game. And I think that can then also bleed back into the full swing. And
it sure does.
He can get more aggressive, So, it's all about just, finding a way to kind of blend in there with his full swing coach and his caddy and just all of us, as a team being able to, just kind of help get him in the right spot and help prepare him as best as we can so that he can, reach his dreams, which, I think he would love to beat Scotty this week at the Tour Championship.
That would be solid. that might lead to a Tour Championship victory, but Xander might have some thoughts around that as well. We shall see. But Parker, thank you so much, man. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Your insights around the short game are incredibly valuable, which in this short amount of time, I've already realized. And I'm like, wow, I need to get out to a short game area immediately and go start practicing some of this stuff right now. I've got some ideas as well. So once we end the recording here, I do want to pick your brain around something that I'm thinking of, and that could benefit our audience. And then from there, we will, but folks, definitely check out Parker's online platform and program at, I believe you said it was shortgamechef.com, if I'm not mistaken. And folks, until next time, we will see you later. Peace out, everybody. Thank you.